Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back, dear learners. My name is Dr. Vishal Chettry and I am working as an assistant professor in the Department of Architecture, Planning and Design at IIT Varanasi. I welcome you to this course on architectural thesis, wherein in today's lecture we will focus on the details about building elevations. So how the building elevations are designed, what are the important aspects that has to be followed when you start preparing building elevations for your respective projects, and some will try to understand some related things which are important to be focused while preparing elevations through some case examples also. So now let us start with the presentation. So looking into the content of this presentation, we will start with the recapitulation, that is what was covered in the previous presentation. Then we will focus on the actual topic that will be covered in today's presentation, which is on building elevations. So the importance of elevation in expressing the architectural character of the building will be discussed. Thereafter, techniques that are adopted for developing the exterior facades will be discussed. Then design principles in elevation the development will be understood. Thereafter, some typical drawing conventions which are necessary to be followed when you draft it, the elevation has to be will be discussed. Then some case examples will be also be presented along with key expectations and outcomes from building elevations. Thereafter, the presentation will be concluded with some important learnings from this presentation. Then some wrap up activities will be covered. Thereafter, resources for further readings, and the up next, that is a topic that will be covered in the next presentation, will be will be introduced to you at the end. So now let us look into what was covered in the previous presentation, in which we focused on preparing double line floor plans through iteration, that is through continuous revision process. So the iterative design process embraces continual improvement, encouraging multiple revisions to reach optimal spatial and functional solutions for the design that you are doing. So the reviewing and refining plan layouts involve critical evaluation of how the spaces interact with each other, how they are to be composed, and how they are to be organized within the planning that you will do. Thereafter, aligning plan with the core project goal, that also has to be well thought of. Techniques for developing and presenting architectural floor plan should integrate with the manual and digital drafting skills that you have developed over the years in your past 4.5 years. So the same knowledge has to be applied when you draft the floor plan, and the floor plan has to match with the it should correspond to the concept that you have envisioned for the project. So this was a small recap to what was covered in the previous presentation, and if you want to understand more about floor plans, so you can just revisit the previous presentation and understand how to prepare floor plans, or how to prepare the double line floor plan for your project that you have selected. Then now let us look into once you have completed the process of preparing floor plan, we eventually move on to the preparation of elevation and then the section. Why elevation comes first is because the exterior facade, if there is any a projection, or if there is any specific element that is visible in your in the elevation, the same has to be seen in your section also. So that is why we the process is like, once the floor plan is developed or when the floor plan is finalized, we start developing the elevation, and thereafter the section is being prepared. So what is elevation exactly? It is a technical drawing that involves the fundamental aspect of design, which also serves as a visual narrative for the building character, for the buildings the feature that is there in the building, and also when it interacts with the environment, if there is any implication on the natural setting, on the elevation of the building. So that also is an important factor that has to be considered. So it is, if you look into the specific definition of elevation, it is a two-dimensional orthographic representation of the building's exterior face. So whatever we see from the front of by looking at the front of the building, that is what is generally called the elevation. It is a 2D orthographic representation. So when you start preparing elevation for your project, ideally we suggest that only minimum 2 elevation of the structure has to be showcased in your thesis. But if you think that the other 2 sides of the elevation also has some important elements and you want to showcase that, then probably you can show that in your thesis also. Along with that, always when you mention your elevation, don't just write that it is either front, side, back elevation, because that doesn't help anyone understand why this labeling is present. And the information with respect to cardinal direction, like if you mention it is your north side elevation or if it is your south side elevation, then probably that specific mention of the cardinal directions will help you also in designing the elevation, because generally in Indian case, especially in near the equatorial, near the your tropical line, and mostly in the central India or in the southern India, we follow one specific approach that our southern side should have minimum exposure, that is minimum openings present in the southern side and western side, so that we don't allow the high exposure of our structure from the southern side or western side. We don't allow, if there is opening, then the heat can easily enter the structure through that through those openings. So this is how it helps you also design the elevation in such a way that it is more, your design is more climate responsive. So that is why when you label your elevation in terms of the cardinal direction, all these small mistake which you might have, which you might generally do if you don't highlight these things, like if you just mention front, side or back, at times we forget to analyze from this context also. So when you mention if it is your north side elevation, then you are allowed to have glass facade, or you are allowed to go for huge openings from the north side direction and also from east side direction. But then but it is generally suggested to avoid openings in your west and southern side. But if you are selecting a site which is at higher altitude regions, like in your cold and cloudy or cold and sunny, so there you are allowed to have openings in your southern side also, so that you trap the heat to a maximum extent possible. So this is an important thing to be kept in mind. So next is the elevation also shows the height of the structure, the facade treatment, that is what sort of design elements have you used, and some specific design features if you have thought of for the structure. So it shows all these 3 distinct features, that is height, any facade treatment, and any design feature that you have thought of for the structure. So all this can be represented. So it also complements the plan and section by depicting the vertical dimension, because in floor plan it is generally the horizontal space layout of the structure, but vertically how the structure is arranged, and whether there is projection or whether there is any specific material that you have used for a structure. So all that will be represented through your through the elevation. Then next is again the definition is very clear to you. Then the purpose, what is the purpose of having an or drafting an elevation for the design, is to communicate the aesthetic quality, material choices and overall design intent of the building. So if you have used any specific material, so the same has to be represented through the drawing that you have that you will do for the particular project. So that has to be very clearly presented. Then the importance of elevation in expressing the architectural character is that it integrates the conceptual design and the built reality, universal graphic language for architects, engineers and contractor to understand the front, the front or the overall, the elevation of the structure gives it's a universal graphic language that is used by all the professionals to understand how is the vertical design of the structure. So what elements are have you used in the vertical part of the building? So that is very clear only with the help of elevation. So it is also essential in competitions, in public reviews and in presentation, because at the end people, the client or the client will always look for the spatial arrangement of the spaces, but at the same time if it is a commercial project or if it is a residential project, people they are bothered about how you have designed the structure, what is the aesthetical consideration that you have thought for the project. So that also matters, and that is represented mostly through your elevation of the structure. Then the design intent is that elevation articulates the architect's vision for the project, showcasing the building's exterior from various viewpoints. So they reveal the interplay of form, texture and also the shadow. Form and function is also an important aspect of the elevation. They highlight the relationship between the building's internal layout and its external expression. So these two are has to be followed when you prepare your elevation, along with some other techniques for developing exterior facade, which includes deriving elevation from floor plan. We generally project our line as shown here. We project all these vertical lines to get to draft the elevation. So all the exterior facade, the end part of the end lines are being projected from the floor plan itself, like as shown here in the example. And then if you are drawing the north side elevation, considering this is the north direction, then the entire front side have to be showcased through with all the projections and how much it is projected. So all this has to be showcased, and if there is any specific material that you have used in the front, so that also have to be highlighted. Next is responding to the context. Successful facades consider the site, climate and surrounding urban fabric. So this is what is represented based on sun path movement. If you do not have choice that the site is southern faced and your main road is from the southern direction, so in that case you require opening, because in the front people always would like to have some spaces from where they can actually view the surroundings. So how have you incorporated that aspect without compromising on the climate responsive features? So there are few ways by which we can do it. You project you add some projection into your elevation, so that the sunlight that enters the structure is being obstructed, or add some jali in the front so that there is no direct sunlight that penetrates the structure. So likewise, there are some design solutions which can be implemented in your elevation to make your building more climate responsive. Then the other techniques are incorporating the user requirements. So for example, if the user would like to have more of green spaces, so in that you can have some the huge balcony or terraces in the front and add some landscaping to the structure. Then functionality versus expression. The most successful elevation balances the functionality as well as the expression of the structure, where elements like jali, louvers and shading devices serve both the practical needs as well as it enhances the aesthetics of the structure. Like having pergola also adds it enhances the aesthetics of the structure. At the same time, it also creates some shade to the open spaces that are there in the front your front elevation. Then the design principles in elevation development includes the visual hierarchy, proportion and scale, symmetry and balance, and the material articulation. So in visual hierarchy, we emphasize on the key elements which guides the eye and creates a focal point. So within the entire elevation, what element has to be focused? We try to bring some contrast with the foreground and background kind of thing. So that is what is being followed in visual hierarchy. Next is a proportional scale, ensuring elements relate harmoniously to each other and to the human body. Next is a symmetry and balance, achieving equilibrium in composition, whether formal or informal. So the basically the design the design principles that were taught to you at your very initial first year level or at the second year level, so the same concept has to be applied when you draft your elevation. So there has to be visual hierarchy, proportion, scale, symmetry, balance, as well as along with the material articulation. So the texture that the material brings with them, along with the color of the material, the inherent color of the material, so that all those have a great role to play in developing the elevation of the structure. So all this has to be kept in mind when you start preparing the elevation of the structure. So these all are self-explanatory and has been explained like I have just mentioned to you in the previous slide. So it is same for the proportion and scale and the material articulation also. Then next is integration of texture and color. So texture and color adds depth and character to the elevation. As you can see here in the images, the material, for example, if you are using a stone facade, so stone comes with their own inherent color, with its specific size and shape. So that in that also there are different types of masonry, either it is the ashlar or it will be rubble masonry. So both ashlar and rubble comes with their own aesthetics, with their own design parameters. So if you use these materials, so you have to keep in mind that what expression do you desire from the building to be portrayed to the user or to the person who will be looking into the structure. What is that information that you want to give up to the people? So that is what is actually expressed through the through elevation. If the floor plan is basically meant for the user who will be using it, who will be the primary user of the structure of that particular building, but elevation is mostly for projecting your ideas or projecting your architectural expression to the people who may not use it, but they will regularly see that structure, and it tries to motivate. It may be a source of motivation to many people. It may be a source of excitement to many people, that people are attracted to that particular building. So at times in commercial projects, if the elevation of the structure is very well designed, so people are automatically attracted to the building, and they would like to visit that building more and try to see that what is there inside in the structure. So it brings up some kind of curiosity, it develops interest. So that is what has to be tapped by the person who is designing a commercial project or some similar kind of project. So that is what is that is how elevation brings like it generates economy for the project. So that is also one factor to be kept in mind. The next is on the typical drawing convention related to elevation. So some technical accuracy has to be maintained. So the floor lines has to be clearly mentioned in your elevation, as the same has to reflect in your section also. So architectural symbols like hatching, if there is any specific elements like glass, so there is a specific hatching symbol that is there for the glass, so the same has to be used. Similarly for bricks, stone, so there is typical hatching for all different types of masonry or the common building material. So the same has to be used for increasing the technical accuracy of the drawings that you have done. Element representation, correctly depicting openings like windows, doors that are there, roof, forms or structural elements has to be done. Comprehensive notation and annotation has to be given, as shown here. Try to show mention the levels. Try to also add the information about the materials that are being used in your that are generally visible in your elevation. Also the height of the entire structure, the levels has to be specified in your elevation. So these are 2-3 specific things that are very necessary to be showcased in your elevation, along with the human or any vegetation that has to be shown in the elevation, so that it gives an idea about the proportion and scale of the structure. Though you mention the height of the structure, but if you add these features like a tree, a human figure in your drawing, so that automatically gives an idea about the proportion and scale of the structure. So one does not have to look into the numbers that are written. By just visual, this is some kind of visual language that gives enough idea about the height and the scale of the building. Next aspect to be kept in mind is about line type and scale. You know that something which is very near to the to the viewpoint will be always bold and very it will be very clearly seen, but the things which are at behind will be lighter and will not be seen with that much of clarity. So that is what has to be represented in your elevation also. So using bold lines or increasing the line weight, your facade has to be designed in that way. So if there is any projection, so that has to be showcased with thick lines than the elements that are there at the foreground. So likewise, intensity of line has to vary, and the line type will also indicate the same story. Scales, generally we use 1:100 to draft elevation, but at times if your building scale is smaller, and try to keep a same scale for your floor plan and for the elevation and section that you will draft for your project. So that creates, and using that, the examiner or your mentor will be able to relate with the drawings more easily, and there will be less of confusion in that. So conventions ensure, if you follow these types, then it ensures clarity, accuracy and professional readability of the drawing. Then some symbols and representations. So symbols simplify elevation details like door, window, roof and all details. Hatching and arrows and dashed line convey specific technical information about the labeling or about the height of the dimensions of the structure. Standardized symbols ensure clear, consistent understanding across the different professional groups related to the drawing that you will do. Then next is about opening and structural elements. Openings like windows, doors and balcony follow standard convention as shown here in the image. You have to showcase all the details, like if there is any specific railing style that you have used, so try to depict the same over here. And then the materials that are used, so you have to showcase all these details in your opening and structural element. Next is regarding notation and annotation standards. Elevations are labeled by orientation as explained earlier, so that the material choice as well as the opening sizes are being discussed and presented in a particular order. So all these levels have to be mentioned. What is your roof level, plinth, floor, lintel and all the different levels like first floor, second floor, or like and so on. Annotations include material depiction that you have to showcase, finish and construction notes if there is anything specific to the element that you have used, so specify that also. Dimensions also have to be added so that the correct height of the structure is being understood. Then now let us look into some case studies and example, like modern urban facade that is generally represented through the glass structure. So glass curtain wall convey modernity and openness. So if you have some kind of your concept is somewhat related to this aspect, so the material choices also respects that, and your drawings and the entire project is you can justify that it is in context to what you have envisioned for the project. So the material choices are also very important, because the elevation completely depends on the material that you have selected for your project along with the design elements, but both have to complement the concept that you have thought. So vertical design and hidden framing creates a seamless facade. In this case, glare and heat can be managed with appropriate shading or coating in your in the curtain wall that is used. So you have to justify the use of material along with what you have envisioned for the project. So next example is climate responsive facade. So facades use verandas, overhangs and sloping roofs and jalis for sun protection, ventilation and privacy. So if you are designing some buildings which corresponds to these concepts, so you have to design your elevation in that way. So this is what is being represented: use of local material because it enhances thermal comfort and promotes the sustainability aspect. So these are some inherent quality or inherent features that are depicted generally through the elevation. Then the key expectation and outcomes from building elevation is that successful elevation balances the aesthetics and functionality. It's not always about aesthetics. The functional aspect also has to be focused. For example, if you have a huge balcony at the top, and then probably to enhance the privacy, people would like to sit over there, but if it's a busy street and lot of vehicles move in that in this particular road, then you need some privacy. So that can be that can be allowed through designing this kind of jali in the like all along the balcony, so that the privacy is maintained and people are enjoying the view that comes up from the balcony. So this is the typical different approach that is there for the design. Contextual sensitivity helps building harmonize with the environment and enhance cultural acceptation. So the material choice that you select for the project has to respect the context. So for example, if you are designing a building which is very near to a heritage structure with all its strong elements and material, so if you come up with something very alien to that space, so that doesn't brings that should be generally avoided, and you have to come up with some kind of design solution which helps you merge with that strong character of the heritage structure. So like that, or if you want to go completely against the heritage character, so then probably the justification that you come up with the material choice has to be justified along with a strong point. So that you have to decide. Then material selection affects aesthetics, sustainability, durability and the performance of the structure. So lessons from diverse case studies as discussed will guide the architect in creating innovative, meaningful and the relevant elevation for the structure. So the outcome of effective elevation is that it helps you clearly communicate your design idea, accurate construction. If you draft the elevation properly, the construction of the structure can be done with less of error and less of defect on the site, or less rework that requires on the site. Enhanced aesthetics, realizing the intended architectural vision for the project with precision and the aesthetics of the structure. So to conclude this presentation, elevations are visible face of the architectural design. So it has to be given that seriousness for the project. So they reveal the thoughtful creation of space. Sketching and analyzing elevation fosters new insight. Elevations express a building's character and intent developed from floor plan. Always project the lines from your floor plan so that the dimensions are accurate and you are able to draw the section for the structure more clearly with less errors. Proper line work and annotation ensures the clarity in your drawing. Modern case studies showcase how technical and aesthetic excellence can be achieved through the elevation of the structure. So these are some activities that are suggested that you can perform at the end of this lecture and then complete these tasks. So these are some resources and further readings regarding the topic. And in our next presentation, we will focus on drafting the building sections of the structure. So I'll introduce you to the building section and then its role in special expression, what is its importance, what different features are being communicated through the building section. Then different types of section will be discussed along with typical drawing conventions that are to be followed for the section while drafting the section. So all these will be explained in the the next presentation, which will be dedicated towards the building section for the architectural thesis project. So with this, I'd like to conclude my presentation, and I hope the details that were discussed regarding building elevation will be helpful for you. Thank you for your patience listening.